Greg Musselman came our way last November. He is VP for Outreach for Voice of the Martyrs, a remarkable organization that is focusing on the persecuted church around the world. And I promised you we'd have another conversation. Well, today is the day. He's written a book called Closer to the Fire, Lessons from the Persecuted Church. And Greg, we want to show some very remarkable footage from Iran. But before we do that, in terms of the world, you mentioned last time Korea is probably the most dangerous place for Christians. We talked a bit about Eritrea, a bit about Iraq. We showed a video from Iraq. What are some of the other areas of the world where persecution is rife?
Well, yeah, I mean, you go into Africa, Nigeria is probably the worst in terms of death, and I've been there, several times, and when I've come back, you feel like you're shell-shocked because you are hearing stories of Christians that are being, massacred. And I try to remind Christians, in Canada and in the West is please be praying for the church in Nigeria on Saturday night, because of the time difference. They're attacked constantly.
Excuse me, I just reached in front of you there, but I gotta show this to our viewers. And you need to tell us what we're looking at here.
Well, there is a church called the Deeper Life Bible Church in Gombe State. Gombe City is where Deeper Life Bible Church is located. And last January, militant Muslims, a group called the Boko Haram, who are bent on turning the northern part of Nigeria into an Islamic state under Sharia law. They've made that very clear. And that anybody that doesn't go along with that, and that includes Muslims, but specifically Christians, and they have really declared war on the church. And so it was a January prayer meeting in the middle of the week, and 40 believers had gathered. They were praying for the Boko Haram, they were praying for revival, they were praying for the nation. And as they were doing that, these 40 believers were, engaged in prayer. 3 young men from the Boko Haram went into the church and started shooting. And by the time it was done, 10 Christians were killed, pastors' wives, pastors' children were killed. And this Bible belonged to one of the believers named Yakubu. And he was one of the ones that was injured. 2 dozen were also injured. He was shot in the hip, and he, of course, was bleeding badly. The church, we went into it, was covered in bullet holes.
And this is blood on this Bible.
This is his brother's blood. And actually, when I got back home, I went to the Bible bookstore in the West Edmonton Mall, picked up a King James Bible, same version as that one, and sent it to him. Wrote a note of encouragement and told him that I would use that Bible, to show believers in Canada and around the world. I've had opportunity to show this Bible in the Middle East, in the U.S., and in various places, to remind believers in Canada the cost to follow Jesus Christ, and to remind them that this is real. My wife has heard many, many stories. In fact, she does even some of the voiceovers in my videos for me, and other friends, and I showed them this Bible, and some of them began to cry, including one of the assistants here at Crossroads, that it's impacting, and often we have this soft kind of gospel message that is about prosperity and blessing and easy life and all that. And yet that is not the situation, as you know, in places like Nigeria and Northern Africa, the Middle East. Even China continues to still be a problem.
Now, we hear terrific stories of how the Lord unilaterally just invests by His Spirit hope and a future in the lives of those who are in some of these closed countries. And Iran is a case in point. I want to talk about it, but let's take a look at this video first of all.
Nader and Aram lead a house church in Iraqi Kurdistan and are also doing significant ministry to Kurdish refugees, especially those in the camps. They are passionate about bringing the hope of Christ to those who are without hope because they know what it's like. Nader and Aram are brothers, and they grew up in a Muslim family in the unstable and volatile country of Iran. Their world as they knew it would change forever after Aram was seriously injured in a car accident in the year 2000. His body was badly injured and he suffered severe head trauma. The then 19-year-old says he literally died at the hospital and encountered God.
I felt in peace. It was amazing, unbelievable peace. Then, at that time, I went back to my body and I saw the people around me and also the doctor. They tried to bring me back to the life. They had the things like the shock, electric shock, to put it on my breast and bring me back. And the monitor was like this line was straight and it came again.
Aram says that's where his story with the God of heaven began. He had more dreams and visions and eventually began a relationship with Jesus. He shared his experience with his brother, and Nader too had an encounter with the Lord and decided to follow Christ as well. By 2003, Nader and Aram were active in reaching Iranian Kurdish Muslims with the gospel, and that caught the attention of government officials. The brothers were harassed and threatened in order to get them to stop their Christian activity. So they fled Iran and came here to Iraqi Kurdistan.
So many people, many youth people, they came and joined the group. So they find out about that, and they were trying to find all these people through us, and we escaped.
Aram and Nader were missing their family, but their Christian faith was deepening, and so was their desire to serve Christ. After being baptized in 2004, the brothers and some of their friends started a house church and were sharing the gospel with Kurdish Muslims, many who came from Iran.
When we tried to convert people, the Iranian government, they find out about us, then they didn't like it. And they make a lot of pressure on my family to bring us back to Iran.
So the Iranian government arrested their father and tried to force him to convince Aram and Nader to return to Iran. Their father refused, and as a result was beaten up and tortured.
After beating him up hard, when he released from the jail after 10 days or a week, he's dead. What you did, that your father is died. So yeah, you will feel guilty.
It was a really hard time. We were under pressure and harassed and missing our family and our dad. But we also had happiness inside, and we had Christ. He appeared and said, "I am your heavenly Father."
Nader and Aram have been kidnapped 3 times and taken to the Iranian consul in Iraq, accused of being spies because of their Christian activity. On the first occasion, a government official from Iran threatened them.
He said, according to the Quran law and according to the law that had been made in Iranian parliament, you should be executed and you should be die because you change your background and you are like dirty on the earth. You should be removed.
Nader's wife Catherine and her family are from Baghdad and have experienced firsthand the wrath of Al-Qaeda. The Islamic terrorist organization bombed their church and many other church buildings in the Iraqi capital. The family is now living in northern Iraq in a house with other families, including Nader and Aram's widowed mother. Catherine says, "We have hope, but we have no future," expressing the uncertainty and despair shared by many Iraqi Christians. In spite of the threats and danger, Nader and Aram will continue to bring the gospel to the Kurds and anyone else who will listen.
Because I have a very powerful and strong person behind me and giving me backup, and that is Jesus Christ.
Now here you have Iranian evangelists and church planters working with the Kurds in northern Iraq. What a world, huh?
It's amazing, Jim, and as we were talking during the video, is God is doing so many things. Like, when you read the Bible, it says, He's going to pour out His, Spirit on all flesh, and He's doing that. In places where the gospel has been really held back in terms of persecution, but where there's a long history. And, and I've done hundreds of interviews, and I've talked to many, those that have come out of Islam as an example, and they've had these dreams and visions of Jesus. And then there's usually the human element, somebody bringing a Bible or seeking them out, or, having a dream, go talk to this fella or whatever. It's quite amazing. And these are exciting times, dangerous times, but exciting times.
These stories, and I've heard several myself out of Iraq especially, but also Iran, they almost sound biblical. They sound like something you'd read in the New Testament, during the early days of the church. Now, in Iran, I understand, and you can confirm this or not, there's quite a move of God among young adults.
Oh, tens of thousands. We have those that we work with, actually church planting in, some of the most dangerous places, Tehran and others. And they're saying that basically Islam has really struggled. There's high unemployment, drug use, alcohol, and all things like. So there's a lot of despair, and as a result of that, many of the young people, especially, are coming to the Lord in these underground churches. They're very passionate and they're very evangelistic in spite of great dangers and fears, and yet the Lord is doing amazing things.
You know, about a year and a half ago, I interviewed Chuck Colson just before he died, and also Phil Yancey the same day. And they both, independently of each other, told me about God and his work in China. And Colson, I think, referred to the move of God in China as the greatest revival in the history of the Christian church. Is that an overstatement?
Well, I've heard that as well. I mean, I've only been in China once, and we got arrested and had to leave real quick. But no, from people like Chuck Colson, who was a great advocate for the persecuted church, and certainly we miss him, but what a great man. Yeah, I mean, that is what we've heard. I mean, even the government figures, conservative would say 100 million, 120 million Christians. I mean, yeah, got over 1 billion people, but that's a significant number. And the stories are, and we work with China Aid in that country, and talk about officials high up in the government that are believers, and I mean, it's amazing what's going on, and their passion for prayer and evangelism is right out of the book of Acts.
Yeah, really, it's really quite astonishing. We've got a minute left here. You mentioned getting arrested in China. How often, as you're crossing borders, going through passport control, are you having to watch what you say and how you present yourself?
Well, you have to be very careful. Even going into the countries, you have to be, cautious on what you tell people. And so why are you going there? Well, I'm a teacher, and and sometimes.
By the way, you're telling the truth.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a teacher of the word, and I mean, there's always been that. How much do you say? And most times we're not asked too many questions. The Canadian passport still is okay.
Yeah, the Canadian passport, I think, is still the best in the world. Greg Musselman is the author of Closer to the Fire, Lessons from the Persecuted Church, and we have this book available at our e-store. And you can log on to crossroads.ca or 1-800-265-3100 and order your copy. It's reasonably priced, and it will really inspire and challenge you. You'll start praying for the persecuted church and the voice of the martyrs who are really giving leadership here. Your website?
Persecution.net, that's our main website if you want to find out the work that we're doing.
Persecution.net.
And Persecution.tv is our multimedia website. We encourage churches to download the videos, show them in the services. We try to produce them in a high quality so they can hear the voices and see their faces of the brothers and sisters around the world.
There you go. Persecution.net and Persecution.tv. Greg Musselman, Voice of the Martyrs. Thanks, Greg.